You walk into a room, no applause, no spotlight, no one notices. But inside, something's shifting. Something powerful is under construction. Not in noise, not in chaos, in silence. This is not a speech about hype or hustle culture. This is about science. This is about the biology of self-transformation. And I want to show you 6 ways, rooted in neuroscience, psychology, and physiology, that you can use to quietly and methodically build a version of yourself that cannot be ignored, no matter how silent your process is. First, understand this. The brain loves consistency more than intensity. That's why the first principle is control your environment before you control your mind. Dopamine, the neurochemical that drives motivation, is deeply influenced by cues around you. Declutter your digital inputs, eliminate reactive noise, and prime your surroundings for focus. You're not weak, you're just overstimulated. Create the silence that sharpens your mental blade. Second, master your internal state through physiological regulation. Your breath, your posture, your gaze, these are not passive. They are levers. Deep nasal breathing, panoramic vision, and even exposure to early morning sunlight. All of these send safety signals to the brainstem. When your body feels safe, your mind performs without fear. You want clarity? Start with the body. Third, obsess over sleep and circadian rhythm. You cannot out-discipline poor recovery. The brain consolidates learning and enhances neuroplasticity, your ability to change during sleep. This isn't motivational fluff. This is literally how your nervous system rewires itself. Want better focus, more willpower, and long-term resilience? Protect your sleep like it's sacred, because it is. Fourth, train in solitude. Don't just lift weights or read books, do it without broadcasting. When no one sees you improving, your nervous system links the reward not to praise, but to process. This builds intrinsic dopamine circuits, the type that aren't hijacked by social validation. You're not chasing approval, you're addicted to progress, and that's unstoppable. Fifth, embrace friction deliberately. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning self-control and long-term thinking, gets stronger through voluntary discomfort. Cold exposure, high-intensity training, focused deep work sessions, they all increase norepinephrine in the brain, which sharpens attention and strengthens emotional resilience. Stress isn't your enemy. Poor stress management is. Choose your pain. It's the currency of growth. Sixth, and this might be the most important, speak less, act more. Every time you talk about your goals before achieving them, your brain gets a dopamine hit as if you've already done the work. This drains your drive. But when you stay silent, the pressure builds. And that pressure becomes power. Power to build quietly, patiently, scientifically. And when you finally emerge, you won't need to announce yourself. Your results will whisper what your words never could. Build yourself quietly, biologically, relentlessly. You see, one of the most overlooked elements of transformation is the environment. Most people try to change their habits without changing the context in which those habits are executed. That's a fundamental error, not just psychologically, but neurologically. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. Your brain is constantly mapping associations between external cues and internal states. Visual clutter or noise, disorganization, these aren't just annoyances, they are signals. Signals that keep your nervous system in a low-grade reactive loop. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus and long-term decision-making, gets hijacked when your environment is saturated with randomness and unpredictability. But when you control your environment, when you reduce cognitive load by simplifying what's in your visual field, when you create a ritualized space for work, learning, or training, you're not just setting a mood, you're rewiring your brain's reward circuitry. Dopamine is released not just when you complete a task, but in anticipation of it, when cues signal that it's time to execute. A clean desk, a specific chair, a certain type of light, these become triggers that flip your brain into performance mode. And that's the difference between willpower and design. Willpower is unstable. Environment is leverage. The brain responds far more reliably to systems than it does to slogans. You don't need to feel motivated when your surroundings prime you for action. So before you try to fix your habits or force a new identity, fix the space that's shaping them. Because in silence and in structure, your nervous system finds the conditions it needs to evolve. Your internal state, your focus, your clarity, your emotional stability is not just a mental phenomenon. It's physiological. It's driven by signals that move faster than thought. You don't get calm by thinking calm thoughts. You get calm by sending the body the right signals, which the brain then interprets as safety and stability. That's the foundation of performance. Let me be specific. When you inhale deeply through your nose and extend your exhale, you're activating the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, the system that tells the brain we're safe, we're in control. This isn't meditation. This is real-time neuromodulation. You're literally dialing down amygdala activity, the part of your brain responsible for fear and reactivity, and giving more room for your prefrontal cortex to come online. Posture matters too. Slouched, collapsed posture sends a subconscious message of defeat. But when you adjust your spine, shoulders back, head level, you stimulate baroreceptors in the body that affect the brain's perception of effort and energy. You physically shape the electrical activity of the brain by how you hold yourself. That's not motivation. That's biology. And then there's vision. Most people walk around in tunnel vision, locked in, stressed, reactive. But when you deliberately shift into panoramic vision, by consciously widening your gaze, relaxing the eyes, you engage neural circuits in the brainstem that decrease sympathetic tone. You feel less anxious, less rushed, more grounded. You're training your nervous system to shift from threat to control. You want focus, control, creativity. You have to earn that state by managing the body, because the body is not separate from the mind. It is the access point. When you master physiological regulation, you're not waiting for your brain to catch up. You're leading it, quietly, powerfully, without saying a word. If you're trying to rewire your habits, sharpen your focus, or build long-term resilience, and you're not prioritizing sleep, you're running in the wrong direction. Because sleep is not rest, sleep is reconstruction. Every single night, your brain enters a process of neural recalibration. That's when memories are consolidated, skills are embedded, and the scaffolding for future behavior is laid down. Here's the neuroscience during deep sleep, specifically slow wave sleep. You get massive synchronization across the cortex, allowing the brain to clean out metabolic waste and reinforce neural pathways that were activated during the day. You're literally strengthening the architecture of your identity while unconscious. And during REM sleep, there's a spike in limbic system activity, helping you emotionally process experiences and reduce threat sensitivity the next day. You want emotional resilience. It's built in the hours you're unconscious. And if you're thinking, I'll just catch up on the weekend, let's be clear, that's not how the nervous system works. The brain has a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour internal clock that regulates hormone release, body temperature, and cognitive performance. Disrupt it, and you disrupt everything. Testosterone growth hormone, dopamine, all of these are tied to that rhythm. If you stay up late scrolling or working under artificial light, you're not just tired the next day, you're hormonally dysregulated. And there's a very specific window early in the morning that anchors this entire system. Getting sunlight in your eyes within 60 minutes of waking triggers a cortisol pulse that's meant to happen. Not the stress kind of cortisol, but the alertness kind. This sets a countdown timer in your body for melatonin release 16 hours later. You sleep better because you timed your light exposure right. So while others are chasing 5 a.m., workouts are late, night grind sessions, the real transformation is happening in the people who are mastering the timing, quality, and consistency of their sleep. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it is the most biologically potent way to fast, track change, growth, and durability, especially when no one's watching. One of the most misunderstood drivers of sustained growth is solitude, not isolation, but intentional, focused time spent training, learning, and building without an audience. Most people don't realize that when you post every step of your journey, when you talk constantly about what you're doing, your brain begins to associate the dopamine reward with external validation instead of actual progress. And that's dangerous because dopamine at its core is about pursuit. It's the neurochemical that motivates you to keep going, not just to start, but to persist. And when it gets tied too tightly to likes, comments, or attention, you're training your nervous system to chase applause instead of outcomes. But when you train in solitude, when no one sees the reps, the hours, the revisions, your dopamine circuits shift. They start firing in response to the work itself. This is where deep neural change happens, because your brain is always learning what matters based on what it rewards. If the reward is public praise, the effort becomes performative. But if the reward is internal, if the satisfaction comes from the process, the progress, the mastery, then your identity begins to anchor to the behavior itself. You stop needing the world to see you. you start needing only one thing, the next step forward. Solitude also strips away distraction. It reveals friction. When there's no one watching, no one clapping, you have to confront the resistance head on. And that's when you learn to navigate discomfort without needing a hand on your back. That's when discipline stops being a buzzword and starts becoming a nervous system adaptation. You're building intrinsic drive, not borrowed momentum, not temporary hype, a true internal engine. So you want to build yourself quietly. Don't just hide your results, hide your process. Let the work become your companion. Let the silence reinforce your focus. Because when the reward is no longer attention, the only thing left to chase is greatness. There's a hard truth. Most people avoid growth. Doesn't happen in comfort. It happens at the edge of your capabilities when your nervous system is under controlled stress. Voluntary friction isn't just a motivational phrase, it's a biological necessity if you want to rewire who you are and how you respond to the world. When you deliberately expose yourself to physical or mental challenge, cold exposure, high-intensity interval training, deep cognitive work without distraction, you trigger the release of norepinephrine, a neurochemical responsible for increasing alertness, focus, and arousal. But more than that, it acts as a gatekeeper for neuroplasticity. It tells the brain what's happening right now matters. Pay attention. Adapt. This is crucial because the nervous system doesn't change unless there's a reason to change. You need signal to noise clarity. Stress, intentional stress, provides that signal. It sharpens the mind. It teaches the brain to remain functional and focused even when the body wants to retreat. That's not just resilience, that's training your stress response system to serve you instead of sabotage you. But the key is dosage. Too much, too often, and you burn out the system. Too little, and you never stimulate adaptation. What works is structured discomfort, deliberately entering difficult conditions, knowing you have control, knowing you're expanding your capacity for regulation. Think of it as mental reps under load. Each exposure recalibrates your tolerance, your perception of effort, and your emotional bandwidth. The people who look calm under pressure aren't lucky. They're trained. Their nervous systems have been shaped by exposure. And that shaping didn't happen in noise. It happened in silence, in the cold, in the early mornings, in the reps no one saw. You want that kind of stability? Then stop avoiding discomfort. Start programming it. Because the friction you resist is the very thing your brain needs to level up. There's something deeply misunderstood about speaking your goals into existence. The idea sounds powerful, but neurologically, it can backfire. Every time you talk about what you're going to do, before you've actually done it, you get a small hit of dopamine. The brain registers that as partial reward, a sense of progress. And here's the problem: your nervous system doesn't know the difference between saying and doing. It just knows the neurochemical signal. So you talk, you feel good, and the drive starts to fade. This is not about being secretive. It's about being intentional with your biology. Dopamine is a finite resource in any given window of time. And if you keep spending it on declarations instead of execution, you're weakening the very circuit you're trying to build. The real signal to your brain that change is happening isn't your words, it's your repeated silent action. That's how the nervous system decides to invest in new identity patterns. And the opposite is true, too. When you stay quiet, when you hold that energy in, when you let the tension build without release, you create a kind of internal pressure. A drive state, it's like compressing a spring. That energy, instead of leaking out into conversation or social media, starts to fuel action. Real action. The kind that compounds. The kind that changes who you are, not just how you look. There's also a psychological edge here. When you stop talking about your plans, you remove the safety net of external validation. Now it's just you and the work, and that kind of solitude forces clarity. It sharpens your intentions. You're no longer performing ambition, you're living it, day by day. Quietly, consistently, without applause, without expectation. This is where the most radical transformations occur, not when you announce your goals to the world, but when you let your silence become a contract with yourself. Because eventually, the results will speak. And when they do, they carry more weight than any promise ever could. There's something neurologically powerful about moving in silence. When you choose not to broadcast every step of your progress, you're not withholding, you're building quietly. And that silence becomes a kind of amplifier. It changes the way your brain experiences success. because when progress happens in private, the nervous system assigns the reward to the behavior itself, not to the reaction it generates from others. This is essential if you want sustainable change. The brain wires most efficiently through repetition and relevance. And when you move without external feedback, the only thing reinforcing the circuit is the process, not the applause. You start linking effort to intrinsic reward, and that's when the transformation becomes permanent. Your focus shifts from how things appear to how deeply you're building them. There's also a phenomenon in neuroscience called prediction error. When an outcome defies expectation, it generates a stronger neurochemical response. So when you emerge with results that no one saw coming, the impact on others, yes, but more importantly, on your own brain is significantly greater. You surprise yourself, and that becomes fuel. It reinforces a belief not just that change is possible, but that it's yours, earned, not given. And neurologically, silence sharpens intention. When you're not sharing your every move, you're also not diluting your focus. You're not processing constant feedback. You're not adjusting course to impress. You're dialed in. And that single pointed focus reduces noise in the prefrontal cortex, allowing for deeper, more efficient neural encoding. You learn faster, you adapt faster, you evolve faster. So while others are busy curating perception, you're curating capacity. And when the time comes to reveal what you've built, it doesn't feel like a performance, it feels inevitable. Because what's grown in silence tends to arrive with gravity. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. Here's the truth about discipline. It's not about the willpower to push through when everything feels easy. It's about creating a system where consistency is the default, not the exception. Discipline isn't a character trait you summon on command. It's a biological function that's nurtured through the repetition of small, seemingly insignificant actions. The nervous system craves routines because it doesn't have to think about them. And when you design your life around structure, the brain stops using precious cognitive resources to fight inertia. Instead, it follows the path you've laid out for it. Consistency, not intensity, drives long-term success. Your brain thrives on certainty and predictability. When you repeat actions that align with your goals, your nervous system begins to automate those behaviors. Dopamine, the chemical that governs motivation, becomes linked with the process itself, not with the end result. And when dopamine gets attached to the process, you stop needing to feel motivated. The system takes over. Think about it. You don't need to constantly hype yourself up to brush your teeth. It's a habit. It's a neural circuit that's been built over time through consistency. The same applies to anything else you want to master. It's not about forcing yourself into a new routine. It's about getting your brain to crave it. And that's where discipline begins. In the systems you create that turn effort into second nature. When you choose consistency over bursts of intensity, you're shaping your brain's architecture. You're not just making decisions every day, you're making decisions easier. And when the decisions are easier, your energy goes into doing, not deciding. That's the secret behind high performers. They don't outwork everyone else. They've simply automated the habits that keep them aligned with their goals. They've trained their nervous system to default to action, not hesitation. So stop waiting for motivation. Build the discipline to create systems that turn effort into autopilot. Your brain will thank you by making your goals inevitable, not optional. The impact of light on your biology is profound, yet it's something most people overlook. We've evolved to be governed by the sun cycle, and our brain and body are intricately tied to it. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do, or rather, the first thing your eyes do, is crucial. Exposure to natural light, especially within the first 60 minutes of waking, is the key that synchronizes your entire circadian rhythm. This isn't just about feeling good in the morning. This is about wiring your brain for peak performance, emotional balance, and deep sleep that night. Here's what happens. Sunlight hits the retina and sends signals directly to the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock of the body. This triggers the release of cortisol, a hormone that's often viewed as the stress hormone, but is actually critical for alertness and focus when it's released at the right time. Cortisol, released naturally in the morning by sunlight, sharpens your attention and sets the tone for mental clarity throughout the day. This immediate burst of cortisol does not lead to anxiety if it's properly timed. It aligns your brain and body, telling them both it's time to be awake, alert, and active. But if you skip this essential exposure to sunlight, if you wake up and spend the first hours of your day in artificial light. You disrupt the timing of that cortisol release, and more importantly, you disrupt the timing of melatonin production in the evening. Without that morning light, your body doesn't know when to start winding down at night, and you'll struggle to fall asleep and enter the deeper stages of recovery and learning. The body's internal clock is thrown off, and all the systems that depend on it, like mood regulation, cognitive function, and even metabolic processes, suffer. This is why so many people end up struggling with focus and energy, especially in the afternoon. They haven't set their circadian rhythm up correctly, and their brain is still misfiring throughout the day. The simple act of getting outside and exposing your eyes to natural light in the morning resets your body's internal clock, makes you feel alert and energized, and primes your brain to perform. This small habit leads to big neurological changes over time, so that by evening, your brain is more likely to fall into restorative sleep. And when you wake up the next day, you're not dragging through fatigue. You're sharp, clear, and ready to tackle whatever comes next. So, make sunlight your first priority every morning. It's not just a feel-good practice, it's a way to reprogram your brain to work in harmony with the rhythms of nature. And in doing so, you'll unlock the potential to perform at your highest level every single day. The concept of external validation is deeply wired into our brains. We're social creatures. Our neural circuits are built to seek approval, recognition, and reward from others. But here's the problem: when you rely on external validation for motivation, you're placing the power to drive your behavior outside of yourself. And that's a vulnerability. Because the moment that validation disappears, so does the motivation. The system breaks down. True long-term growth doesn't come from what others think of you. It comes from building an intrinsic feedback loop, one that doesn't depend on applause or likes or even recognition. It's about learning to trust that your actions in and of themselves are worth the effort. This process of internal validation rewires your brain to rely less on external cues and more on the feedback your own body and mind give you. When you move toward a goal, the sense of progress and satisfaction should come from within, from knowing that you're becoming the person who does the work, who shows up, who pushes through. This shift is critical because the moment you base your self-worth on how others perceive your work, your nervous system becomes fragile. You're constantly assessing whether you're being seen, applauded, or rewarded. But when the validation comes from within, your sense of self-worth isn't tied to the whim of external forces. You know that every step forward, every action you take, is reinforcing a version of you that you respect and admire. The feedback you're receiving is the quiet, internal sense of accomplishment, the deep satisfaction of being true to your commitments. Building intrinsic motivation also means being okay with the discomfort of being overlooked. It's not always glamorous to be in the trenches, doing the work when no one's watching. But the reward you're earning isn't fame, it's competence, it's skill, it's mastery. And over time, as you build these internal neural circuits, the need for external validation diminishes. The satisfaction of progress itself becomes your reward. And when your brain starts to recognize that it no longer needs the applause of others to keep going, you're no longer chasing someone else's approval. You're chasing your own sense of integrity and growth. And that's a pursuit that's infinitely more powerful, sustainable, and fulfilling. When you stop waiting for the world to validate your efforts, you create a kind of unshakable internal confidence that nothing and no one can take away. That's how you build not just external success, but internal resilience, quietly, steadily, and with far greater impact than you may realize.